Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we will be talking about socialization. What exactly is socialization, you ask? Well, I define it as the lifelong process through which people learn about culture and learn to become functional members of their society. We are essentially the people who we are because of socialization. Socialization teaches us role-taking, it controls our behavior, and it establishes our social identity, what we most cherish about ourselves. Let's first look at the process in which it controls our role-taking. It is essentially the reason why we act differently in different social positions, in different settings. This is because the role we play in those settings is very different. And I define role as the behavior which is expected of a person in a particular social position. The way we interact with a parent, for example, is typically very different from the way we talk to an employer, or a child, or even a professor. While learning roles, we also learn rules that teach us to conform to social expectations. The sole reason we conform to these is because we've internalized societal norms and values already since birth, through observational learning from watching our parents, our peers, and our siblings, and even anyone who was around us at the time. Those societal norms and values that we learn are rules ingrained so deeply within us that we accept them without question. Socialization is important mainly because we have seen the effects of having the opposite, social isolation. An example commonly used is the case of Jeannie, a young girl who had been locked in a cage in darkness by her father, and when she was finally discovered at around the age of 13, she was described as an unsocialized primitive being, which was not comparable to being human by some psychologist. While biologists tend to focus on the role of genetics in human development, otherwise known as nature, social scientists take into account environmental influences, like socialization, also known as nurture. This has ultimately become known as the nature-nurture debate. However, it has been shown that both factors do influence, to a certain degree, the development of humans. There are few social learning theories which may explain how socialization works, since we have talked about what socialization is, and we've also described its importance in today's society, but we have not yet understood how the concept works. The first of which is direct versus indirect thinking. Direct reinforcement occurs when one is punished or rewarded for a certain behavior, but indirect reinforcement occurs when one sees or observes another, usually a peer, get punished or rewarded for a behavior. For example, if a child speaks to his friend and his friend is talking about how he got in trouble with his father for crying, the child who's speaking to the child who got punished learns that it is a societal norm that men aren't supposed to cry. Although this is wrong, this is how societal norms function in today's society and how constructs are created, social constructs. Role models are a superb force of learning because they are the people whose behaviors we admire and also seek to imitate. A limitation of this social learning theory, though, is that it disregards the interconnections between social structure and socialization. For example, due to parental divorce, many children have begun to experience family instability, which often leads to delinquent behavioral problems. Another important theory that takes into account some of the disadvantages of social learning theory is symbolic interaction theory. This was developed by sociologist Charles Horton, and it states that children start life with an awareness of their social identity, but they don't know who they are yet. But over time, they gradually begin to differentiate themselves from their environment and develop a sense of self. This series of steps takes place in phases. The first phase is known as perception. We imagine how we appear to other people and how they perceive us. For example, you could say, "I bet he thinks I'm fat." That would be the first phase. The second phase is interpretation of the perception. We imagine how others judge us based on their perceptions, based on what they see, what we think they see. For example, we could say, "He's disgusted with the way I look because he sees that I'm fat." Phase 3 is known as the response. We experience self-feelings based on how we think other people judge us. If we think they see us in a favorable light, that tends to correlate with proudness or happiness or self-confidence from us. But however, if we think they see us in a negative light, we may feel angry or embarrassed. Another similar theory developed by sociologist George Herbert Mead describes how our self-identity develops. When we first differentiate from me and I, our self-identity begins to develop. So the I is essentially more creative, imaginative, and self-centered, and this is what we essentially start out as. While the me, which is the socialized version of ourselves, is aware of others and has self-control and is less selfish. For example, the I in us would impulsively and selfishly grab another kid's toy, while the me in us would ask for permission and share the toy. Another group of stages that occurs with this is stage 1, 2, and 3, preparatory stage, the play stage, and the game stage. The preparatory stage occurs when you're under age 2, and this is essentially known as the I stage, where there's no distinction between yourself and others, and you learn through observation, but you are very self-centered and focused on yourself. Stage 2 is the play stage, which occurs from around ages 2 to 6. And this is when you start to first distinguish between yourself and others, and when you start imitating significant others who are the people whose opinions we value and people who influence our thinking. But then in stage 3, the game stage, which is from age 6 onward, we start to understand and anticipate multiple roles, and we connect to societal roles through the generalized other, which is the norms, values, and expectations of society that affect a person's behavior. By this time, we will have reached the me stage. But take into account that even after the generalized other has developed, the me never fully controls the I, even in going into adulthood, as we often still make selfish and impulsive decisions. Another theory presented by sociologist Irving Goffman that piggybacks along the ideas that were aforementioned is impression management, in which we provide information about ourselves to others in a way that puts us in a more favorable light, but we tend to downplay or conceal information that puts us in a negative light or is less appealing. For example, in school, children tend to focus on their learning and bring motivation into the classroom, while suppressing or holding back their desire to play video games or even leave class. Now we will discover who actually teaches us how to participate effectively in society. These are called socializing agents and can be an individual, a group, or an institution. Families are very important examples because parents and their parenting style can affect how a kid learns or behaves. Siblings and grandparents can also transmit certain beliefs on role modeling, and peer groups and friends are especially significant since they help us become more skilled with language and internalize the generalized other that I spoke about earlier. They help us learn the norms that we did not learn at home. Teachers are by far the most important socializing agents who motivate students and increase their academic capabilities despite students' innate talent. By far the most dangerous and strongest socializing agent is popular media and culture, which is seen when children scroll through their Instagram pages or through Snapchat. For example, when children watch R-rated movies or play violent video games like Grand Theft Auto, there's some concern that they become more violent and aggressive toward their peers. This is an example of how popular culture can shape who we are and how we behave. Often people over time start to go through resocialization, which is the process of unlearning old ways of doing things and adopting new attitudes, values, norms, and behaviors. This can be both voluntary and involuntary. For example, when an American wife moves to the Middle East with her Iranian husband, she learns to follow those local customs. This is an example of voluntary resocialization, which is usually mild and doesn't take much effort to occur or adjust to. However, involuntary resocialization can occur against a person's will, such as being sent to a foster home or an assisted living facility. After learning about the intricacies and complexities of the process which allows us to essentially survive in society, I encourage you all to note any ways that conforming can be detrimental. Please comment down below your thoughts and also speak about your self-identity in the comments section below. Chapter 5, Daily Social Interactions, will be published soon. Take care.